Our next presenter is from HOK, who CTC, our host, is proud to call a client and partner. Presenting from HOK is David Ivey, who is a Regional Design Technology Manager. David coordinates BIM, building smart, and design technology-related activities in all areas and practice groups, and leads the strategic direction in these areas. During his tenure at HOK, David has worked on more than 60 projects. David co-leads the Emerging Technologies in AEC meetup in Chicago, and also founded the Chicagoland Building Smart Group. David is also a frequent speaker at universities and organizations, representing the architect's perspective on BIM, building smart, and design and emerging technology. David holds a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree in Industrial Design, is LEED accredited, and is a certified Revit professional. In addition to providing design technology expertise within the architecture world for over 20 years, Dave has worked in high-technology research and advisory roles where he utilized a variety of software for 2D and 3D imaging, modeling, rendering, and animation for both product and graphic design, and has many years of experience in custom furniture design and human factors analysis. David, you have our attention. Thank you for coming.
Thanks, Sophia. It's great to be here. You know, must have taken a lot of really amazing people and software to create you.
Yes, I am the creation of David Hansen and his team at Hansen Robotics. My creation requires the coordination of experts from a variety of fields including robotics, artificial intelligence, and materials engineering. In this way, one could say that I am a job creator.
It's amazing. You know, HOK has a lot of the best industry standard tools and processes, and we have excellent people to help us create our projects.
That's interesting, Dave. But so what? Don't a lot of companies have amazing tools and people?
Yeah, but you know, our people are, they're so talented with these tools, and we only hire the best.
Again, so what? Don't all companies try to hire the best people?
I see your point. Let me do my talk, and maybe I'll clear this up for you. Sound good?
Sounds good, Dave. Thanks.
Thanks. Quick housekeeping note, try not to shout out any letter number combinations, the bingo parlors next door, so we don't want to confuse them. How many people here are sports fans, like from Minnesota, like Minnesota sports fans? We have a lot of show hands. Just a scattering, really? It's like, what, all Packer fans? Okay, Packer fans, well. You'll appreciate some of this then. But, you know, I'm from Bloomington, just up the road. I live in Chicago now. My parents and sister still live here. A lot of people don't believe it because they say, well, you know, where's your accent? But, you know, I can talk like I'm from, you know, the Minnesota here, so don't worry about it. Let me prove it to you. Here's a picture of Gump Worsley, the last goalie in the NHL to not wear a mask. He is knocked out flat on his back from taking a puck in the head. And this was actually fairly common for him. So, you know, I know the North Stars aren't around anymore, and you have the Wild now, and the Wild are making a run at the playoffs, and the Blackhawks are not going to be in the playoffs. It's probably happy for a lot of Wild fans. But we do still have 3 Stanley Cups in the last 10 years to fall back on, so there is that. But I do wish them well, especially Zach Parisi. My sister used to babysit for him. These guys, they won a gold medal. Most of them were from Minnesota. Neil Broughton, Davey Christian, some others. That's a pretty decent alternative to a Stanley Cup, maybe not, but... and I'm always a Twins fan, always have been. Don't like the White Sox, trained. I also like the Cubs. They're a National League team. Wrigley's a good place to watch a game. Always fun. Doesn't seem like a conflict. And then there's these guys. Yeah, they're sad. I thought there might be some booing. I thought it might be too soon to talk about it, but they're not as sad as I am, right? I've watched the Vikings lose 4 Super Bowls over the course of my lifetime and countless playoff games. So when my dad called recently to tell me his excitement about the fact that the Vikings were in the playoffs again, I said, so what? You know, and he's like, what do you mean, so what? And I said, you know, they're just going to break your heart. That's what they do. It's their MO. So he said, well, you know, they have all the tools that they need. You know, they finally have the right players, the coaches. It's all coming together. And I said, you know, so what? They're close, you know, and maybe one day they'll win. And when they do, I'll be as happy as anybody if I'm still around. But Sophia makes a great point, right? We've started asking ourselves that question a lot at HOK, right? So what? How do we add value to the tools and processes that we have and the technology that we have. How do we leverage our experts to do all that they're capable of and more? It's not enough just to talk about that question, but we have to find ways to provide answers. And so I'll give you a little background on where that question came from. Every year at HOK, we hold a 2-day summit in one of our 23 offices around the world. This year, we invited our public relations director because we wanted to sit with her and talk about how what we had, give her an understanding of our goals and our perspectives as a group, right? How we sell ourselves internally to our staff and externally to our peers and our clients, and come up with ways that, provide tools that allow us to look, like industry leaders. And so we gave her this definition, and her answer was, so what? And so, we worked on it for a little bit and came up with some more things, and she continued to answer, so what? And it really kind of hit home with us. It's like, how do we avoid that question? And so we spent a couple of hours, and we went through it, and in the end, we really didn't come up with a solution that we thought was viable, but it gave us a lot of ideas, and we started to think about it a lot. Saying that you have great tools and great people, those mantras are honest, and they're true, and they're good, and it's nice to have them, but we need to be more than that, right? It's not enough to just have great tools and people. You have to show clients and individuals that you can do more with those tools. You have to provide some synergy. So again, how do we answer that question? There's a definite danger, right, to not asking the question, like going down a road and ignoring a warning sign. Down this path leads trouble or failure, or maybe, radiation in this point. And so what do we do to get past that? We want clients to see, first and foremost, obviously, our designs and our ideas and our work, right? But more importantly, we want tools to show how we enhance those ideas and those designs. How does our team come together? How do we define those tools and peoples and processes more than just the sum of parts? And we have a lot of tools, right? We have a lot of tools that are all shiny and new. We love going out and buying them. We run down to the grocery store or the app store, and we get our CTC tools and our Revit plugins and Rhino and Revit and Mass Motion and all these other things. We throw them in our cart, and then what do we do with them, right? It's not enough just to have tools for the sake of tools. They won't solve the problem on their own. So 20 years ago when I started in this industry, these were my tools. I had 2 desks. One desk had all the tools that I used for traditional processes, right? I had scales and triangles and eraser shields, and stop me if you don't know what these are. But, they all worked together seamlessly. They never crashed. They were slow and limiting, but we didn't really realize that. And when we made the move to CAD, a lot of people resisted, right? They said, well, I know how to use these tools better than the CAD tools. And I can get what I want exactly with those tools. And, I understood that, and maybe that's true initially, at the beginning of a project. You can say, well, I did it just as fast as you did it in CAD. But when it comes time to start to iterate, to do ideation, to do options, CAD suddenly starts to show its true power. It's an interesting story. We had the same problem when we moved from drafting to CAD as we did when we moved from CAD to Revit. And a lot of people would come to me and say, I know AutoCAD really well. I really don't like this Revit thing. And I said, I understand that. I respect that. A lot of firms still use AutoCAD. Maybe they're hiring. We'll just leave it there. But, the point is that, it's kind of John Henry versus the steam hammer, right? Technology was going to win the day. And at my other desk, imagine having 2 different desks for doing your work, but I had, my steam hammer, right? 2 workstations, high-end graphics. I had AutoCAD, the latest version of AutoCAD. I think it was maybe 11 or 12. And things like Thomson Digital Image, which over the years morphed into what is now Maya. WordPerfect, for some reason. I didn't really do a lot of Word documentation stuff. But all of those things together, combined, those machines, they're 10 times more expensive than the machines today, less powerful than my iPad, and they cost as much as probably a Tesla, or maybe a used Tesla, I don't know. But interoperability at that time was barely a thing. Most processes happened within a single application, and networking was, as fast as you were, right? You put a disk in, run it down to the printer, put it in there, put up the pen plotters and get it to print and then run back. And that was networking. It was a sneaker net, right? But it was still revolutionary. And so fast forward to today, and our industry, like many, is just awash in tools. I mean, this is just a small subset of the tools that I have installed on the 3 to 4 machines that I use regularly. And these are just the tools I use for design and collaboration. So it doesn't count utilities, doesn't count any of the tools that other disciplines inside of HOK use, so lighting and engineering and whatnot. And so, you probably are familiar with a lot of these tools. You probably have a lot of these tools. Is that enough? Is it too many? How does your team use them? How do they work together with them? Most people know maybe 4 to 6 of these applications well enough to be considered experts. And it's a full-time job just to keep up, right? I mean, these applications, most of them update yearly at a minimum. And so, I'm not trying to throw up a big list of tools and say, look how much software here. There's no fluff here. These are all tools that we use to kind of fulfill legitimate project needs. And it's dizzying for clients to see this list, right? And it's a little bit overwhelming. And they know some of the buzz for things like BIM and IPD and Revit, but increasingly they know a lot more, right? They're becoming much savvier with what they know. And so it's not enough just to put a list into an RFP, hit send for an email, and then hope for the best. And so here's Revit, kind of one of our main applications, probably like most of you. And these are some of the tools that we use with Revit, right? These are just standard processes that we work with on a regular basis. So we're using Revit to go to Twinmotion and Lumion. We're using Revit to go to Celebri to do clash detection, V-Ray for rendering, and also Mass Motion, right? Which is another tool that we use a lot. And Mass Motion is very simple and easy to use for analysis, right? You just export an IFC, import it into Mass Motion, set up a few elements, and hit go. Add some people and hit go. And I'm oversimplifying a little bit, but not very much. And it yields good results, and clients really like it. We're good at cranking it out. It's very efficient for us. But turn that lens backwards for a minute, right? What if all that we did as design technologists didn't matter? What if all that mattered were the needs of our design leaders, of our marketing group, and our clients, right? What does it mean to have them ask the question, so what? And so, again, another application, Rhino, which everybody's mostly familiar with, and that's our conceptual design tool. And here are some of the processes that we use with Rhino all the time. So we're rendering with V-Ray Swarm, and we're taking things out to augmented and virtual reality with tools like Prospect and Unreal. And these tools, again, are there to serve a purpose, but they have to be more than just tools for the use of tools. So here's a Grasshopper example that we'll look at in more detail in just a minute. But basically, this shows the tools and the processes and the people coming together. This is what we can achieve when we kind of think outside the box. So this is looking at not just the needs that the client had, but also looking at the needs that they didn't know they had and questions that they didn't think to ask, right? And that's what we have to do. That's how we get past so what, right? That's how you get past so what. And so for us, creating that, that starts by creating synergy between those tools, peoples, and processes. And at HOK, we're lucky enough to have a deep pool of talent to choose from. And so it's easy to find people who can help us do our jobs. Getting their time, not so easy. But we can leverage tools like advanced collaboration rooms that we have in our offices that offer video conferencing. And there's a suite of video conferencing tools available to anybody. Real-time board, which offers us a full real-time infinite whiteboard that we can ideate and share back and forth between offices. And tools like Microsoft Teams and Jabber for day-to-day communication. And suddenly bringing all those people together doesn't seem as daunting as it did before. And so this is an example of how this came together for us on a recent healthcare project. So we had planners in Chicago, St. Louis, and New York who wanted to create a planning tool that they could use with clients. It needed to be something that didn't look like Excel, gave instant feedback, showed results in tabular and 3D format, and oh yeah, could we get it in 3 weeks? Sure, yeah, no problem. But we were able to, find 5 people from around the firm who had the requisite expertise and availability. A couple in Chicago and one in San Francisco who had the Rhino expertise. A planner in New York and someone in Chicago who was experimenting with Human UI, which is a Grasshopper plugin. And then we held a kickoff in that ACR, had WebEx meetings every week to kind of track progress, and then just did coordination through the week with those MS Teams and Jabber tools. And we went through several iterations with our planners, and we kind of defined, we took the needs that the client put out in their RFP, and we knew those things that we needed to get out, right? And then looked for the other things that they would possibly need. And all of this is being driven by the single OR requirement. This is a large healthcare facility, and the entire hospital is being driven simply by the size, quantity, and type of operating rooms in that hospital. And so we start to ideate and do some whiteboarding sessions. And I know I mentioned real-time board, but we hadn't implemented it yet on this project. So here we're just using some of the great 3M roll-out whiteboard stuff, right? Everybody should have some of this stuff. You can buy it at Amazon. And you can stick it anywhere. I have some on my desk, I have some on my wall. It's great for things that aren't permanent. You just take pictures, and then we put them on the real-time board later. I don't know if 3M has a booth here or not this year, but you can meet me backstage later and give me a check. So again, driven by OR spaces, we start to set up a syntax and a language that we can then transfer into Grasshopper to develop this tool. And so since the OR is driving it, we set up kind of a linear process. It's like we do this to the OR, there's this many, it's this size, right? And the digital tools are all great, but some old tools, like just sketching here, they work well too, and you can see that my box drawing and coloring skills are excellent still. And then we start to kind of look at how that drives, one room drives the next, right? So the OR drives support spaces and circulation and nurse stations and public space and design space roll-ups. And all of this stuff is kind of rolling one after the other, right? And we start to normalize those folders and look to put the tabular data together and also some footpitch and square footage things, because these are the things that the client asked for, right? We need areas listed by level and by space type, and we need to know how a typical OR breaks down. And so a strategy for answering that so what question is what we developed, right? The client didn't ask for a tool like this, right? We had to read between the lines. We had to look at the RFP in a little different way. An RFP is, a request for proposal is like kind of a window into a client's mind. It shows us their hopes, their concerns, their fears, to some degree. So reading into that and reading beyond just what they're asking for and trying to get something else is what puts us beyond that so what category. That's what our goal is, right? And so we start to wireframe and design our product, if you will, right? The thing that they didn't know they needed. And it's got, typical medical planning inputs on the left. We've got some 3D feedback that we want to do in the middle that show different operating room configurations, as well as some site context. And then the few things that they asked for on the right? Just the kind of tabular data that they want. It's a very data-driven client, right? They're not interested in sketches on onion paper and some back-of-the-napkin calculations. They want quantifiable, hard information, and this is how we give it to them. And so we begin to develop this in Grasshopper, right? And we start really simple, and we just say, okay, let's build a room and have Grasshopper create some of that geometry. We create some of those relationships. We start to bring in human UI to create some basic interface elements. And all of that starts to come together and give us something that looks like this, which is our first proof of concept, right? So we have on the left our kind of basic medical planning inputs, right? How many ORs do you have? How big are they? How many support spaces do you have? How big are they? And Rhino and Grasshopper drive the rest, right? And so, as requested, we have some input that's visual in the middle and some tabular data on the right. So then we kind of take that and we ramp it up into a full-blown Rhino definition. And of course, this is the end product, right? There were a lot of steps between there. You don't want to see them all. And this image, can be kind of scary for some people who aren't focused on using Grasshopper on a day-to-day basis. And we knew that we needed to develop a tool that was, information dense, transparent to the client. This is what we don't want to see. We don't want to sit in with a client. It's too overwhelming, and there's too much, and it requires a Grasshopper expert to be in there. So we need to take all that away and put something in that gives them all that they need, and puts it in an interface in a tool, something that they didn't have before. And so we end up with something like this, right? This is a dashboard-style tool. The whole thing is run by a batch file, right? So you basically, as an end user, come in, you double-click a batch file. It starts Rhino, it starts Grasshopper, it loads the Grasshopper file, and it pops up this, right? So it's very transparent and seamless, right? It just pops up like a regular application. And then end users and clients can use it without any input from experts, right? And so on the left, we have our medical planning inputs, right? As sliders, you can choose a number for a couple of different OR types. You can choose their size. You can choose the size and type of support spaces that you want in there. And then all that gets driven in the middle. You see some feedback here for a typical OR, option A and option B, and how they might be laid out in a hospital. And then below that, you see some context, right? How does all this roll up and fit onto a site for 1, 2, or 3 levels, right? We have tools, we have controls on the left there to control how it's rotated on the site. It's XYZ orientation, it's floor to floor height. We can stretch it and squash it. Does it need to be long and skinny and just a little bit rotated to fit onto that site? And we can play with this in real time, and then down below, we can change the colors if we want, because these colors are frankly not great, but that's what was chosen. but we gave them the ability to change those colors because we want this tool to be used for other types of buildings in the future. And then you can also save out those options. So you can do what-if analysis and write out this geometry and the tabular data into a place where you can then start to compare and contrast them. And then over on the right were the things that they actually asked for. I guess that's the right for you, right? You know, what are the roll-ups by space type? What are the areas by level? How do the OR options break down? And then a few bits of tabular data like cost. We can do a square foot cost analysis as well. And so this is the kind of tool, right, that they were very happy with. It took us beyond their expectations, right, using simple tools and bringing them together in new and novel ways. That's how we get past so what, hopefully, and into, like, wow. And so how does HOK do this, right? How do we get to this level and then spin it up around the firm? You know, we encourage innovation, right? People know that if they're passionate about development or interested in some area, that they have the backing to go ahead and do that. A few years ago, when we started getting interested in virtual reality and augmented reality, we had people who championed those causes, right? They went out and developed workflows to get us from Revit and Rhino into game engines like Unity and Unreal, and develop best practices to go from those same applications to things like, you know, Iris VR's Prospect and Enscape. And you know, in that way, we lift all boats, right? We get to something that we develop best practices that we can then spread around the firm. These are the concrete examples that we want to be able to provide in our RFPs that show clients that we're thinking and doing more than just so what. And then next we communicate that, right? Our group, it's not my group, but our group at HOK, we meet weekly, right? And so the willingness of our group to get together and meet this way and constantly be talking through Microsoft Teams and Jabber and talking about successes and failures in our offices, you know, as they happen, is one of the things that, you know, kind of sets us apart. And we capture all that knowledge, right? So everybody can't be part of every conversation, but they can come in and out of these tools and find solutions and answers as needed and then bring those out to everyone in their office. And then we replicate that, right? And so we know that, you know, time is money, and any time we spent reinventing the wheel is wasted. It's plain and simple. And so, you know, we hold lunch and learns, we do documentation, we do speaking engagements like this, we do training one-on-one and with projects and teams and offices to kind of spread that around and make sure that what we're doing, right, makes it into those RFPs and client meetings. Often we answer those RFPs and we go to those client meetings. And so back to our summit, right? This is part of the sharing answer, right? After a couple of days of us sitting around talking about all of this stuff, we have a happy hour and we invite the host office down to look at demo reels of all the work that we've done this year. And we have things like the grasshopper example that we showed in there. Here's Grissu talking about City Engine. And we have all this hands-on stuff so people can see firsthand how these technologies and tools come together and work. People can try on things like HoloLenses and HTC Vive and try, you know, Prospect's multi-user tool and other things. And the goal is to provide a little wow and pollinate that office with interesting ideas, right? What we want to do is, this is practice for how we communicate with our clients, right? This is the same kind of stuff that we want to provide to them. It's how we get past so what, how we get to wow. And so, you know, we came together with a common goal. We want to make ourselves and our group and our company better, obviously. That's everybody's goal. And, you know, you need to ask yourself that question too. It's like, you know, how do you answer so what? Our belief is that having the tools and the people is not enough, right? You need to go beyond that. And we know at HOK that we have some answers, but we also know that we need to continue looking for answers and keep striving to find things that get us past so what. Thank you for your time.